Hello and welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 540. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. Today, I wanted to talk about May being Mental Health Awareness Month. And I wanted to share a few mental health tips. So I'll do that in today's episode and also in 2 weeks whenever I'm back on kind of individually musing with you. So, May being Mental Health Awareness Month, there's just so many ways that it's really important that we pay attention to this part of ourselves. And so I wanted to share kind of part 1 today and then part 2 in 2 weeks. Now, before I dive in, I wanted to let you know about a few things that are coming up right around the corner. All right, so first, we have our next TDJ Live Masterclass, which is a free offering, and it's always tons of fun happening on Sunday, June 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. There's a link in the show notes, which can be found at kimberlywilson.com/540, where you can sign up. Also, July 10th is our next virtual retreat. So these are 3-hour excursions into creativity, mindfulness, yoga, and reflection. And this one's going to be all about mid-year. So I'd love to have you join us, and registration will be opening soon. And there is a link to that also in the show notes. Now, this fall, I'm going to be releasing my TDJ Lifestyle e-course that comes out once a year, and we touch on the 5 tenets of Tranquility du Jour: creativity, style, mindfulness, wellness, and compassion. So if you'd like to spend 5 weeks diving into the TDJ philosophy, would love to have you join us, and you can join the waitlist. There's a link in the show notes for that. And then finally, I am hosting the Tranquility du Jour Passholder Collective. Basically, what this is an annual pass where you get access to most of my offerings, including a bunch of bonus offerings that are just for you. Now, we're full, of course, for 2021, but soon, towards the end of the year, we will be opening it up for 2022. And if you'd like to join the waitlist so you're the first to know, there's a link for that also in the show notes that gives you insights into what we do and why this collective is so important and so powerful, really, as we think about how do we embody this Tranquility du Jour philosophy into our everyday lives so that we ultimately have more tranquility in our lives and we can in turn bring more tranquility into our world. So would love to have you join us in 2022, which is crazy. I'm even talking about that. But believe it or not, it is somewhat right around the corner. All right, so mental health awareness. So what I want to kind of start with is the importance of making your mental health a priority. Now, you probably are fully aware of this being important and it also being a priority. I think it's something that people have been quite mindful of during the pandemic. And yet, also it's one of those things that can sometimes be the last to get attention because we're busy knocking other things off of our to-do list. So a few ideas on how to make your mental health a priority. Now, one of the biggest things, which again is easily overlooked because we're a society that values doing, is the importance of sleep. All right, so sleep is so critical to our well-being. And it's interesting, I read some study just over the weekend that was talking about how lack of sleep has actually been linked to dementia, which I thought was really interesting. And so it's like, get those Z's because it's really important for our mental kind of cognitive abilities, even as we age. So check in, notice, how is your sleep? Are you getting enough? There are many apps that you can use to track it if you're not sure. You feel like, I sleep, but I wake up, I'm still exhausted. So you can notice and pay attention to and track how's my sleep going? Am I getting enough? Do I have a sleep deficit? How can I make this a priority? The other thing, of course, is physical activity. Ideally, at least 30 minutes of physical activity a day. This could be walking. This could be ballet, right? It's something that I'm super passionate about right now. It could be yoga. It could be running, biking. Whatever it is, just making sure that at least 30 minutes a day is happening for you. Now, some people will even say 20 minutes of elevated heart rate. For some of us, that may not happen. But if you can just get that body moving at least 30 minutes a day, it's really helpful, for tension releasing, and then also just for overall maintenance. Food. Okay, so this is important. Of course, we know we need to eat, but are we eating the right foods? And as I was researching and pulling some things together for today's podcast, one of the things that kept coming up is curbing sugar intake, which I was like, because those of you who have listened to the podcast or know me know that is like something that I struggle with. I love sugar. And so I have to really, really work to try to reduce that. And so, that's one of the things that's definitely encouraged is that we reduce sugar intake. Also that we focus, of course, on whole foods. And, also when we think about food, it's okay, what else are we ingesting? And definitely trying to cut back or cut out alcohol. The reason being, since it's a depressant, that is not necessarily helpful for our mental health. Now, of course, glasses of wine here and there or whatever it may be that you may enjoy, totally fine. We just want to make sure that we're not using it to escape reality in a negative way. And what I mean by that, I'm going to share some ideas on ways to kind of quote unquote escape reality in healthier ways, right? And alcohol or drugs or even like an overly excessive intake of caffeine is not necessarily as useful or helpful for our mental health. And of course, mindfulness, and we talk a lot about this in Tranquility du Jour, but this idea of being present, being in the moment, paying attention so that we are responding versus reacting. And that means when we're triggered, we get that annoying email or we get that frustrating text message or we get, something that just feels curt or insensitive. It's like, okay, how can we respond to this in a way that is not reactive? And, the thing that really helps with that, I love to share this acronym that I've been taught in the mindfulness world, and it's STOP, S-T-O-P. Of course, S stands for stop, T, take a breath, right? That nice, juicy inhale, exhale. O, observe what's happening. Ooh, my pulse is going up. My face feels flushed. I'm hot. It's like you just notice, like physically, mentally, emotionally, what is happening for you. And then P, proceed with awareness. So becoming more mindful about what our triggers are can be very helpful with regard to our mental health. Of course, play is important here. As adults, we often do not give ourselves the opportunity to play, to laugh, to have fun, to enjoy, to kind of embody that childlike wonder. What would it take to get back in touch with that for you? Okay, talking to someone when you need support, kind of asking for that, reaching out, processing your feelings. So talking through what you're dealing with is so important. Now that can of course be done in a journal. It can be done with a trusted companion, or it can be done with a professional. Another thing that can be really helpful for our mental health and making it a priority is creating routines so that we have certain things that we do in the mornings, that we do in the evenings, that we do in the weekdays, that we do in the weekday evenings, that we do on the weekends, right? So what are those for you? Certain routines. And they don't have to be long, but they're just things that are a part of your regular life. Now, the thing with this that I also want to counter with routines is to also encourage you to shake them up, because sometimes we can get into habits where we're like, oh, it's time to do this now, it's time to do that. And, instead of it being like, oh, it's great because it reduces decision fatigue, like, oh, I don't have to think about what am I going to wear or what am I going to eat? Like, I just have a routine, or what am I going to do on Saturday morning? I have a routine. Sometimes too, if we find ourselves feeling a little like, oh, not excited about a routine, it can be important to shake it up. So a small example, say for me, I have to walk my dogs multiple times a day, right? So what if instead of going the same way every time, I go a different route? I'll tell you, I did that last week. And what was interesting is there was this whole kind of beautiful garden filled with all these flowers that I had missed because I had not been down that way in a few weeks. And it's a small thing, but I was like blown away with the color. There were peonies. Oh my gosh, peonies in the wild. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, you probably saw them in my Instagram stories because I was so excited. But I had missed those for a few weeks because I'd been going the same route every day. So a small example, but recognizing how even those things we do every day, how can we shake them up? Maybe you always have hot tea in the morning. Well, what about adding some ice cubes once it's brewed, right? So just little things. So making your mental health a priority. All right. So a couple other things I want to share is coping skills. So coming up with coping skills or coping strategies that help you when you feel strong emotions, such as anger, anxiety, depression, stress, all that stuff that is part of life. How can we become more resilient, more stress tolerant, more compassionate towards ourselves and others? So a few things that can be really helpful distractions. Again, you remember I said earlier about having healthy distractions. So sometimes our minds are on loop, just replaying that darn email we received that we are still a little upset about, or, rereading something, or kind of rehashing a decision, and you're just on loop. So things that can be helpful is to healthily distract yourself by writing, by going on a walk, by watching a show, playing a game, reading, going for a drive or a hike, something that just allows you to do something different to shift your mind. Doing a puzzle, right? Taking an online course where you are learning to watercolor, something that is just going to focus your mind to get you out of that loop. Now, another idea that might be helpful as we think about coping strategies is interpersonal strategies. So, whenever we need to take good care of ourselves, and, it's not so much about a healthy distraction, but kind of interpersonal. One big thing is setting boundaries, right? And saying no. I like to say, no, thank you, right? Versus just no, but no, thank you. Now, unfortunately, I can't add that to my plate right now, or I'm not able to do that for you at this moment, or I don't have the energy for that. So recognizing the importance of that as a coping strategy. Also for, caring for others and playing with others. So like such as a pet, that's very helpful. A developmental way of enhancing our interpersonal skills. Being assertive. And what I mean by that is practicing assertive communication, right? So there's passive assertive and aggressive. How can you assertively say, no, thank you, right? Or asking for what it is you need, getting clear on what it is you need. So those are some ideas on interpersonal coping skills, even encouraging others, right? So supporting and nurturing others. Now, if you want to think about this also from a physical, so I talked about those a little bit earlier and making your own mental health a priority, but the importance of sleep, food, routine, exercise, mindfulness, limiting, mind-altering things like caffeine, alcohol, drugs, etc., and really, really moving that body. Now, if you want to think about also some cognitive, some mental coping skills, I like to think about, for me, making a list of goals. What are my goals for this month? What are my goals for this quarter? What are my most important tasks, my MITs for this week? How can I take a class? Now, I will say, I have a problem with this and the fact that I tend to buy way more e-courses than I could possibly consume. Matter of fact, I realized that last November, I bought a 30 credit, CEU credit, therapy e-course. That has been on my to-do list, and I write it every week. Okay, I'm going to start this. Now, I haven't started it yet, although I do have it pulled up in my browser. But the thing is, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 30 hours, right? How do I find 30 hours? Well, it's like the same saying, which I don't love this saying, but how do you eat an elephant, right? And it's one bite at a time, although we would never eat an elephant. But the idea is like, how do you tackle a big thing? Okay, one piece at a time. So my goal this week is 1 to 2 hours of this 30-hour course to just dive in. So I just want to precaution, this whole idea of taking a class, because you can become obsessed as I am with taking classes, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I have a backup of e-courses. But that is one way from a coping strategy to keep that mind active, learning new things. Being flexible, right? There's so many ways in which life throws a curveball, which of course we have felt and received over this past year plus with COVID. But how to be more flexible and recognize, like, sometimes we just have to be malleable and shift and recognize, what is it we have control over? So whenever I think of coping skills or strategies, it comes down to these healthy distractions, mental, caring for our mind, physical, caring for our body, and interpersonal, caring for our relationships. And not even just relationships with other humans, but also beings, right? So animals, the environment, thinking about all the ways in which we are interconnected, and how can we use these ways as coping skills for ourselves and then also for others. Another idea around kind of Mental Health Awareness Month is sharing resources. So sharing your mental health story. One of the things I'm talking about in the memoir I'm writing is being diagnosed with major depressive disorder after the death of my beloved pug, Louie, in 2015. And before that, I had lost my firstborn cat, Bernard, who I was equally, well, maybe not equally, but pretty obsessed with. And then 2012 was my grandmother, who is 99.5, but still too young. And, so it was boom, boom, boom. And then 2017 sold my studio, right? So, which was also my baby of 18 years. So there's 4 kind of different types of losses, all within a matter of, 12 to 17, that's in 5 years, right? So, kind of sharing struggles with that, anxieties, pieces that come with it. So there is something that's important in sharing your story. I'm actually reading a book right now called Writing as a Way of Healing. So sharing your story, it could be, of course, like sharing it with others, or sharing it with a therapist. It could be sharing it with friends. It could be sharing it in a blog. But I love this idea of writing as a way of healing. And if you're curious about this, the author is Louise De Salvo. And then she also references a lot about James Pennebaker's work, who you've probably heard me reference quite a bit. He is a PhD, Dr. Pennebaker, who has written a lot about writing as a form of healing. Volunteering. So whenever I say this, there are many, many ways in which, like in college, I volunteered for the crisis line. And, so there's many ways that we can do things like this. One thing I want to mention, actually next week, I'm hosting a pet loss support group, a free event that I host every other month. And again, it's free, and would love to have you if anyone's interested or kind of dealing with this. And sometimes people come who haven't yet lost their pet, but they know that it's on the horizon and they want to prepare. So if you're interested, I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes. There's hotlines, so sharing these suicide prevention hotlines, domestic violence hotlines, rape hotlines, like all sorts of ways in which you can help be an advocate or a voice. And then, of course, donating. There's so many beautiful causes out there that help support mental health that, again, if that resonates with you, getting involved and supporting. And then the last piece I want to mention as we talk about making mental health a priority is reaching out to others. So what I mean by that is like reaching out to others and saying like, hey, how are you? No, like really, how are you? Over the past few months, I have heard of 3 people who have committed suicide that was completely unexpected and really didn't even give signs or indications that they were struggling. And so, it's heartbreaking, right? It's heartbreaking for those who deal with the loss, try to, understand what happened. What did I miss? Where do I go from here when my, partner, my loved one is no longer with me? And so really, I think it's so important that we get comfortable with asking the questions. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? I want to know what's going on. I care about you. I'm having trouble reaching you. Do you need anything? So it's like also asking if somebody's recently been diagnosed with depression or, is struggling in some way. How's your treatment going? Do you have the resources you need? How can I best support you? So, sometimes it's just reaching out to someone and being like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Being kind and compassionate, right? We never know what someone else is dealing with. And so these are some ways in which we can help make a difference in someone else's life who is struggling. And again, sometimes we never know that this person is struggling until it's too late. And I don't say that, of course, to scare anyone, but just as a reminder that it's really, we never know what's going on in someone else's life. So it's like, A, how can we be as kind and compassionate as possible? And then B, how can we reach out and keep those connections that are important to us? Because people need a little extra love now, I think more than ever. And with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, how can we make it not just a priority for ourselves, but also nurture and support others? Now, in the show notes, I also have a link to a May is Mental Health Month Toolkit. And this I pulled off a website from MHA, Mental Health America, national.org. Okay, and I'll have a link to this, of course, in the show notes. But I wanted to provide that with you because it's filled with some really great stuff. In it, you will find, my goodness, in the back, there's all these worksheets such as dealing with worst case scenario, managing frustration and anger, processing trauma and stress, tips for taking care of yourself, all that good stuff. Again, a lot of the things that I spoke about today. And also tips for processing change, right? Because, what is constant in our lives? Well, it's change. And so how can we get more comfortable with that? Because humans, we do not like change. There's even some tips for coping with anger and frustration. Anyway, there is a lot of really good stuff. I love this workbook that's been put together, or toolkit is what they call it. So again, you'll find a link to that in the show notes, which is at KimberlyWilson.com/540. So I'll be back in 2 weeks sharing more tips on making mental health a priority. And I would love to hear from you and know kind of where it is you're struggling right now, what you would like to hear more about. And then I can even cater that episode directly to you. Finally, I would love to be connected, and we have a Tranquility du Jour Insiders Facebook group where I share resources, inspiration. You can make connections with others and be part of the online book club, which we are reading Effortless right now by Greg McKeown. and McCowan. And what's so great about this book is he wrote Essentialism, which many of you probably know because it was this great bestseller, and it's really, really good on getting down to the most essential parts of our lives. And the idea here with this book is how do we make those pieces as effortless as possible? Which is just like sounds decadent. So I've started it. It's so good. I encourage you to please read along with me, and you can do that over in the Facebook group. Of course, there's also a blog post about it. At the beginning of every month, I post what is the new book that we're reading together. And May marks 1 year because we started last June with Right Fragility, and then here we are with Effortless in May. So we've come full circle 1 year. A reminder, if you're not receiving love notes yet, to please sign up for those. I love sending little doses of love to your inbox each week. And also, there's a link to my 6 books and planner, ways to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And then also, you'll notice over on our podcast page, KimberlyWilson.com/podcast, there's screenshots on how to subscribe to the show and Apple Podcasts, and then also how to leave a review. Would be so grateful if you hit those stars, if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and if you shared a review on why you listen, what it is you find helpful and useful. And then, of course, I love hearing from you. So please drop me a note, hello@KimberlyWilson.com, and let me know how I can best serve you. I really love it whenever people reach out and are just like, hey, this really resonated. Thank you so much. And I heard from a lot of you after my last podcast on life lately. So thank you for taking the time to write. It means a lot. And a heads up on what's else is to come this month. We've got Alyssa, who is a therapist in the DC area, talking about creating an authentic business and life. And then also at the end of the month, we're going to hear from Shelby, who's written a beautiful couple of books on grief, and we're going to be talking all about grief. All right, so mental health, authenticity, we had aging last week, and I really hope that May is, all these tools will be super duper useful to you as we navigate Mental Health Awareness Month and taking deep, deep good care of ourselves. I wish you a beautiful week ahead. Thank you as always for tuning in. Namaste.